Thank you so much, Stefan. It's always great to hear about what Slocket's up to. Next, and finally, not last but not least, we have Edgar from Realitio, which I've asked twice and still messed up. Thanks very much.
Hi, okay, so I'm going to go through this kind of fast because I don't want to cut into everybody's drinking time, but I've got a URL at the end that will give you some more information. So I'm going to talk about Realitio. We call it Snopes meets Mechanical Turk on meth. This is, okay, sorry, okay. Okay, we built an Oracle service right back in about 2013 called Reality Keys. I think this was the first smart contract Oracle in the known universe, and we learned a bunch of things, and we've sort of used that information to build our new thing, Realitio, which is purely on Ethereum. One of the things that we found was that we'd assumed when we started making a smart contract Oracle that what people mostly needed was sort of getting stuff from websites, that there were trusted websites that had the information that you'd mostly need, and that we just had to find a way to get that information to the blockchain. And that's something that Oracleize and Chainlink and those guys are doing a really great job of right now. But the problem that we're now focusing on is if you want to get kind of unstructured human-generated data, right? So if your contract needs some information and there isn't some trusted website that you can use for it, often you actually have to get humans to create that information for you. So I guess most people here are probably familiar with the Oracle problem. If you've got a contract, there are a bunch of things that it might want to do. The canonical case is kind of prediction markets and bets. If you want a bet about who won this game, you can make a smart contract that will handle that bet really well, but it needs to somehow know who won the game, right? It needs some kind of source of information about the outside world. So if you want to do, insurance on the blockchain, if I want to insure against whether my office burns down, then the blockchain needs to know, somehow your contract needs to know, did the office burn down? A use case I'd really like to see, we've had a lot of people doing kind of ICOs and things where there's this model where people throw a load of money at developers, and then they trust that those developers are gonna build the thing. And once those developers have got this pile of money, they're not necessarily incentivized the way you'd like them to be. So it'd be much better if you could send that money to a contract and then only unlock that money if they hit the milestones. But if you want to do that, you need to know, okay, did they hit the milestones? Or what was a contract hack? That's another really useful thing that you could have. And we've just found that this huge long tail of information that people need that they can't get from websites. So this is what we were kind of trying to design for. We want to handle any question with kind of a publicly available answer, right? Any question that people actually know the answer to. We want it to be fast in the typical case. We want it to be cheap to use, and where there are some expensive parts that are kind of inevitably expensive, we want that funded by kind of liars and idiots. We don't want the people we want encourage to use the platform and put answers in to have to pay for that. And we also don't want the people needing the information to pay for that. So I'll talk to you in a second about how that works. We want low gas usage. I kind of feel icky when I do something that's more than 100,000 gas. So we try to keep below that for any action in the system. And no funny tokens. It's all Ether. So we want this to be as easy as possible for contract developers to use and for for dApp users to use. And they've definitely got Ether for gas, so we're just going to do it in Ether. So this is what we built. There's a fairly simple economic game behind this. What's going to happen is that anybody can put in a question. When you put in a question, if you want to, you can put up a reward for answering the question. You don't have to. Anybody can then answer that question, but when they do, they have to post a bond. Posting a bond sets a countdown clock ticking. If that ticks down to 0, then that's your final answer and it's done. But in the meantime, somebody can look at that answer and say that's wrong. They can change the answer, but when they've changed the answer, they've got to double the bond. So you can imagine this is going to escalate pretty quickly. Each time you get a new answer, you reset the clock so there's time for people to check it. And then once it counts down to 0, that's your final answer, and whoever gave that last answer, or whoever gave the correct answer, is going to get paid. And the people who gave the wrong answer are going to lose their money. Now, you may be thinking, okay, what happens if Joe from Consensus shows up and puts in some huge pile of Ether on a wrong answer? So we then have a backstop, which we call the arbitrator contract. So at any point, anybody can pay a fee to that arbitrator contract to request settlement of the question. Paying that arbitrator freezes the question until you get a report from the contract. It's generally going to cost a lot of money to get this arbitration. And the point here is that we want the means of arbitration, which I'll talk about in a second, to be things that can be very slow and very expensive. Expensive both in terms of money. Sometimes you want to use actual resources to investigate something. And also in terms of sometimes social process. So a lot of the best processes for getting answers in a distributed way require a lot of people to pay attention to something. So it costs a lot of money, but we don't want normal users to actually have to end up out of pocket. So if you're honest, what you can do is you can keep on raising the bond. If somebody's put in the wrong answer, you can keep on raising the bond until it's, let's say, $10,000. And at that point, you can then pay, let's say, your $5,000 fee to the arbitrator. And then when they rule in your favor, you're going to collect the bond and take the money and make a profit. So the approaches that actually work right now for arbitration are something like these. So anybody can make these arbitrator contracts. So anybody can just put in a new approach. But the stuff that we've got in practice, so Kleros is kind of a distributed court system. It's not necessarily fast, not necessarily cheap, but it's a decentralized system for getting answers. And the guys at Kleros have built and are just doing final testing on an arbitrator connector that will allow you to escalate these things to Kleros. You can use Augur as the backstop. Now, you may think, okay, why not ask Augur directly? Augur is an awesome system, but it's kind of optimized for settling their own markets. It's not really optimized for getting information for other people, for other people's contracts. Now, we've built this connector that allows you to settle something by creating a market on Augur and watching it resolve. The developers at Augur, some of them get kind of mad at me for doing this. If you parasite off Augur, then you kind of mess with the economics that Augur is relying on. And I wrote a Medium post the other day called The Parasite and the Whale about this whole problem of parasites. So if you're interested, I'll give you a link to that at the end. What Gnosis are doing is kind of cool. So they've got a stakeholder DAO system that is going to manage upgrades to their contracts. And what they're going to do is use that DAO as the arbitrator. So, like I say, in the vast majority of cases, you'll settle with this escalation game. But as the backstop, if you end up needing arbitration, you can take it to their DAO. There's an approach called subjectivocracy, which I spoke about at a previous DevCon, which kind of messing around with. I totally love it as a concept, but we're still working on it. I'll give you a link to that previous talk. And you can use trusted third parties. Now, obviously, that's not what we're about in Ethereum. Generally speaking, it's not something that we want to do, but it's often a practical way to do it, given that all of the other approaches, although, Augur's going pretty well, but it's all experimental, and we don't really know. And we also know it all has kind of security bounds, where there are certainly situations where all of these trustless approaches will break. So let me just say a little bit about using it in practice. I'll kind of skip through these, but the main thing you want to do, if you go to the DApp and you put in a question, you get the ID from the question, and then you can set up a contract using that ID. And you can just call it like this, get final answer, passing the question ID, and that'll give you 32 bytes back with your answer, or it'll revert if there was something wrong with if it hadn't been finalized or it didn't exist. You may want to ask the question using your contract, so you can do that like this. We're passing in a template ID, the question text, the arbitrator, and the challenge timeout period, and a couple of things I won't bother you with. Sometimes you want to wait until something happens and then get the information. So if I want to say, did my office burn down? I could make a contract. I could make an insurance contract that says, did it burn down in 2019, and then wait till the end of 2019 to claim. But if it burns down tomorrow, then I want to claim, the day after tomorrow. So what you can do is make your contract so that the user puts in, or whoever's claiming puts in the question, and then they pass the ID to your contract. And your contract calls out to Realitio and just checks that it's a question for the question content that you're expecting. that it has a reasonable arbitrator that you think is good, that the challenge timeout is long enough, and that the bond is high enough to trust that information. I'll just skip through formatting questions. If you're interested in this, you can maybe check that out in the documents later. And I should say just a little bit about things that won't work. So we rely on the blockchain being available. I mean, this is true also of a lot of kind of second layer systems. If somebody is able to DOS the blockchain up to your timeout, then that's not going to work. We need a certain amount of precision in the questions. So since the way you correct a wrong answer is by putting in the right answer, if you're not at least 50% confident that any of the answers are correct, then you may be reluctant to correct something. There are certain kinds of tricksy questions that have also caused trouble with Augur. Also, for example, if you put a URL in the question, and then you control that URL, then you can change what's at the URL during while people are playing the escalation game. So that kind of stuff. There are just kind of bad questions that can mess things up. I've been pitching this to you guys since you're developers mostly as a thing for contracts to use, but it can be usable just purely by humans. We've got this really interesting way of getting information out of people using this escalation game, backstopped by all kinds of amazing things that are happening now in Ethereum. So it is potentially something that can address stuff like fake news and these kind of topical information issues. Okay, so that's all I'm going to say today, but if you're interested, I've put up a URL with a bunch of resources. This has got, so Realitio/EDCON, so that's got some links to some of the things that I mentioned, like subjectivocracy or forkonomics, and also my piece on parasites. And also it's got a link to our Discord channel, so if you're interested or you're thinking about building something using this, please jump on our Discord channel and just say hi and tell us what you're thinking of building. Okay, I hope that helps you, and I can't wait to see what people make with it.